I really believe is what we play with as kids really we become a lot of that. And we had a basement in our house that had a room in it, that had a window in it. And my brothers and I would create puppet shows. And we would do that, and we would just go round up all the kids in the neighborhood and say, you have to watch this puppet show. And they did. I mean, they were good. But it was really about storytelling. It was about connection. It was about making things up and just feeling very alive in that moment, feeling very connected to who I was at that time and being able to share that with other people.
Welcome to the Mom Found Your Imagination Hub, your weekly podcast to inspire you to dream bigger. Plan out how you're going to get to that next level in business, find the energy to keep going, and make sure your creative juices are flowing so that this way you get what you really want rather than having to settle. Get ready to discover how mom founders have reimagined entrepreneurship and motherhood. Ever wonder how they do it? Tune in to find out and stretch yourself by also learning from diverse entrepreneurs who might not be moms, but who have lessons you can tailor about how you can disrupt industries and step way outside of your comfort zone. I believe every mom's superpower is her imagination. In this podcast, I'm going to give you the mindset, methods, and tools to unleash yours. Sounds good? Then keep listening. So how do toys shape who we become? Have you ever asked yourself that question as you are giving your child a toy? If that toy is going to influence their career choices ahead or the way that they are, their character. Today, I sat down with a fascinating toy historian, Chris Byrne. Now, he is a 35-year-plus veteran of the toy industry. He's held major marketing and creative positions earlier in his life, and he's appeared on TV talking about toys and play in the US and around the world. He's even been on the Live with Kelly and Mark show as a regular guest. And he has his own podcast, by the way, the Playground Podcast. So Chris reveals today the hidden power of play, from how different toys develop everything from relationship skills to problem-solving abilities. We also explore why true play isn't about reaching an end goal. It's about embracing the pure joy of the journey. So whether you're looking to understand the art of playing alongside your kids or giving them some space to explore independently, this episode is going to change how you think about playtime. So I encourage you to join us for this rich conversation about rediscovering the magic that happens when we give ourselves permission to just play. Okay, so before we jump into the conversation, I want to just let you know that after the conversation, I would invite you to explore the art of play with my book, Fertile Imagination. Why is that relevant to you as a mom? Here's what I want you to know. It's really hard to guide our kids toward imagination if we've secretly lost touch with our own. So in my book, Fertile Imagination, I share with you the exact framework that I used in order to reawaken my imagination, play with my imagination, stretch my imagination, and strengthen what I believe to be our greatest superpower. So this framework is super simple to follow. It is guided and it is also provided in lots of really cool journaling question prompts in the book. And it's going to be the same exact process that I used in order to really get back in touch with that little childlike spirit that all of us has, but maybe we forgot we have held quite tightly close to our hearts. So I invite you to go ahead, rediscover your creativity, and see if you can find your childlike zest for life. Because I really believe that it's hard to teach our kids things that we may have forgotten are natural to us and maybe came naturally to us when we were younger. So enjoy the conversation. The link to the book is available in the show notes where you're listening to this, a bit.ly link. So it is bit.ly/fertile book. You can absolutely grab a copy right there of Fertile Imagination. If you wanted the audio version, that is available exclusively via Amazon. So go ahead and check out the show notes for that link. Thank you again. And I hope you enjoy the conversation and let me know what you think. At the end, I will share with you my top 3 takeaways that you can apply to your immediate mom life. Thank you so much. Chris Byrne, I am so excited to have you here on the Mom Founder Imagination Hub. How are you?
I am very well. I'm so excited to be with you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
I couldn't get enough of your TED Talk. I was like, oh my gosh, he's not just a toy historian, he's like a toy psychologist. I loved it. I loved it. So welcome to the show, Chris. I want to just start with the big question on my mind. Help me understand from your perspective, decades in the industry, learning about, the art of play, like what is an imagination to you? And do you consider it a superpower?
Well, I absolutely consider our imagination our superpower. It is the one thing that really one of the many things that really define us as human beings. Nothing happens in our world that doesn't start in the imagination. It can be, what do I want for lunch? Or what do I want to be when I grow up? Or should I marry this person? Or should I have children? Or whatever it is, because we begin in the imagination. And other kinds of animals, you just put a food in front of them and they eat, it's sort of instinctual. But for us, it's not, as humans, it's not just instinctual. It's we literally create our worlds on a daily basis, and that starts in the imagination.
I agree. And it's interesting because as a fully grown adult, I would say that when I was writing my book, Fertile Imagination, and I see it as like a superpower for moms who are technically adults, I feel like it's a topic that is seldom discussed amongst adults. Like, is this something that you are noticing, or maybe people that have that childlike quality because of your industry? What's your take on imagination, the art of play, and being an adult?
Well, I think all of those are really critical to who we are, because play is really the act of asking a question, what if? What if I do this? What if I, as an adult, it can be, what if I do whatever? For me as a kid, it's like, what if I jump off this wall? What's going to happen? But we grow up and we have a little bit more adult kind of perceptions, if you will, for that. And it really is like trying to spin out a scenario. So if I am going to take a new job, for example, what is that going to be like? Who am I going to be working with? And we begin to develop stories around things in our imagination. And those stories are very important because we really can't take action to make things real until we've imagined them as a concept.
Yeah. And so, okay. So this is something that I'm struggling with right now. This is like real time. I need some help. Get me unclogged sort of stuff. So this idea of having a story in my mind and having a vision I want to make real, the vision side of it is so hard right now for me to see, mainly because it's like there's things that I've envisioned in the past, but I haven't made happen. So
Right.
I don't know kind of like how to play myself to a solution or a vision, or just kind of like think with a little less of like the past, like
Right.
hindering this vision.
Right. It's a great thing. I mean, I'm sorry you're going through that, but I think that if you look at how a child plays, right, when they get an idea and they don't sit there and think, well, if I just do this or I do this or I do that, it's going to be fun, right?
Yeah.
They go, oh, that's not fun. I'm done. I'm on to the next thing. And I think as adults, we should do that too. If something is becoming too much effort, if it's not working, then we just drop it, and go on to the next thing. And I don't think there's any harm or foul in that. And I think that when you look at a kid who is imagining and playing, they're not judging the play as they're doing it. They're looking at, well, where did this take me? And where should I go next from it? And it's a much freer, kind of more peaceful way to go through the world. I mean, I talk about things that I've done that turned out to be mistakes, and I said, well, that was a once in a lifetime experience, as in, I don't have to do that again. I learned the lesson.
Yeah. And I think, approaching any problem from that perspective releases that pressure to get it right the first time. And
Right.
it gives you like the levity to get back up and just be like, okay, let's go at it again. And
Right.
I imagine like, because I noticed also, and I know that this side of it might be a little bit more conventional thinking, but like you actually bring these ideas into corporate settings, the art of play. And I'm like,
Right.
if I think about the different environments where it's not okay to play, it's not okay to make mistakes. Like, how do you sell that idea of we're just playing right now and don't get frustrated if it works or not in like a corporate setting,
Well, one of the things that's so interesting in a corporate setting is people come into a meeting or a brainstorming and they're focused on one specific outcome, right? So if you're focused on an outcome, you kind of end run the process of play, because play is a process. Play is asking, what if, let's go down this road and let's go down this road and see what it is. So I always encourage people to be as off the wall as possible. I will give you an example that almost got me fired.
This is a good one. Okay.
And nobody will like it. But I was working with the Ideal Toy Company, and we had the Shirley Temple doll. And we had these porcelain $400 Shirley Temple dolls. And if Shirley Temple dolls were huge in the 30s and still with doll collectors, but nobody was buying them. And we thought, how do we get rid of them? And I said, well, why don't we put them on the QE2 and use them as skeet? like people can launch the doll. So the brand manager got really mad at me, but and told me I was inappropriate. But as we talked more, we ended up doing a doll collecting event with Cunard that actually turned out to be good. So the idea is, go out there and play off the wall in a safe environment, obviously. So the idea of creating an environment where it's safe to play, where it's safe to have that sort of impulsive, childish response to a situation is okay. We would never have promoted that in a corporate sense, right? But the idea that we were just playing with ideas and being silly, that opens the pathway to being really creative and to seeing what could actually work. And then once you get that, you put the action steps in place to get to the next step.
Yeah, I think just, going crazy and just really trying to break out of conventional thinking and our very logical pathways in our mind. It's like, first we do this, that, the other. It's almost like some sentences, right? And the way we like greet each other, it's so like rehearsed that to come up with something like, oh my gosh, I love your outfit. It reminds me of like a toy soldier or something would be like way off, but it would start rapport, I think. Rapport, or like, people would be like kind of weirded out. But I've always tried that. How can I not weird people out?
Well, it's right. Well, that's always a question, but I don't really worry about that too much. But I think that one of the things, again, as I was saying about process, but also getting over fear, right? Well, as adults, we think, well, what if I get it wrong? Children, when they play, if you watch them play, they don't worry about getting it wrong. They just think, well, that didn't work. That didn't do what I wanted it to do. Let me do something else. They haven't built a hierarchy of judgment and really being unkind to themselves about doing something wrong, and if you embrace play, there's really no you can't be wrong when you're playing, right? Some things may be practical, but there's imagination and there's spinning things out, things that might never become real, but then things that actually could practically become real. And the process of getting to that point is actually pretty joyful.
And I think we could all use some more joy these days. That's for sure. Adults and children alike. So let's see. Let's go back in time. So let's go back to the time where you recall maybe playing with a toy and feeling like an insane amount of joy. If you can think about, your one moment or one of the moments, I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Well, it's really interesting because one of the things that I really believe is what we play with as kids really becomes we become a lot of that. And we had a basement in our house that had a room in it that had a window in it, and my brothers and I would create puppet shows, and we would do that, and we would just go round up all the kids in the neighborhood and say, "You have to watch this puppet show." And they did. I mean, they were good, but it was really about storytelling. It was about connection. It was about making things up and just feeling very alive in that moment, feeling very connected to who I was at that time, and being able to share that with other people.
Wow. So that's interesting. So it's funny because I feel like maybe because I was an only child for most of my upbringing, like a lot of the things I did were just on my own. And I had to really figure out how to make something out of what was around me. So
Mhm.
let me share like this one thing that I would do to just pass the time. And of course, like in the background, like there was like maybe Magnum PI playing or, name Hawaii 5 whatever my mom was into. So I would go to the closet and I would take out a shoebox and I would proceed to create like a scene. So they're called dioramas. Because I
Sure.
looked it up because I was like, this is a weird thing that I just kept doing all the time. And then I would create little figurines and put like little slots, on the sides and move
Oh, wow.
the little cardboards in and out. And I was like, okay, I have to ask Chris, like, what does that say about me? I have no idea.
Well, I mean, I would say it sort of starts you as a storyteller, which is what you're doing today, right? You're
Mm,
telling stories and you're facilitating other people telling stories. But it's also, I mean, especially for children at that age, it's about trying to make sense of the world. And the stories they tell us, like trying to make sense of relationships. I'll tell you another story. Years ago, we were playing with some kids with Barbie dolls,
mhm,
right? And they had all these different Barbie dolls, and one kid took all the blonde Barbie dolls and they were making fun of the brunette Barbie doll.
mm.
And we were just watching this and going, yeah, this is somebody who is working out a reality in their life. And that is really what play is, because even as she, in this case, it was a girl, became powerful in that situation, was able to stand up for herself. You're giving your brain, right, the sense that you can actually do this. If you do it vicariously, you've already had that experience on some level. So that when you confront that in real life, it might be easier, or you might have a solution. I mean, how many times do you go into a situation, an interview or whatever, and you've rehearsed what you're going to say?
For
Right? Your
sure.
brain already knows that. It's like visual, what they talk about in sports, about visualizing, the outcome. You're already having that experience, which is so cool, because our brain doesn't know the difference sometimes between reality and what we imagine.
I love that. I love that. And so, yeah, who knows what I was trying to work out? There were a lot of things going on in my home, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, I think, that idea though, just like trying to work things out that, maybe you don't have that first person experience with, but like doing it through the use of a toy. Have
Right.
you noticed out of curiosity any sort of changes with the dynamics between toys and kids now that there's like AI sort of toys out there?
There are so many different types of play experiences. What we were just talking about is more a traditional doll or action figure or stuffed animal kind of play, where a child is really doing that. Some of the other stuff with AI or
Mm,
license based, like Star Wars, Marvel, all of that is beginning to understand yourself as a capable human being. So, for example, if I'm a superhero, that's I can have the feeling of what it's like to be a superhero. And I always say, if your life is all about mom is in control, eat your peas, get in the minivan, do your homework, suddenly if you're a superhero, that's very empowering. So, and then empowering as an individual to be
mm,
able to confront the world in a different way because you're empowered. So it's very classical, the kind of totemistic idea that we take on the powers of the superheroes. And even though we're not going to fly, we're not going to lift, we're not going to pick up a truck, we're not going to do that. You have the emotional sense of capability, which is really what it's all about.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know. Like now that I think about like my kids, for example, like their toy experiences these days is really YouTube videos and playing video games and things like that. And
Right.
and I wonder if that's also along the same thread of what you just said, feeling the different capabilities like running fast or jumping high, things like that.
I think definitely. I mean, it's
Mm,
YouTube videos are like today's cartoons, right? On some level, I grew up watching cartoons, and it was so they're looking at who are my role models, and who
mm.
are somebody's doing something. Oh, I'd like to try that, or oh wow, they tried that. I'm not going to do that, but what would it be like if I did this kind of thing? So I think that it's a window on the world, and people are always concerned about screen time, and I'm never concerned about screen time so much as I'm concerned about what's on the screen. So that is what's being modeled through the YouTube things that you as a mom or a parent want your child to be consuming, because it can be very supportive, or it can be kind of dangerous depending on what kids have access to.
Yeah. And it's so interesting what you're sharing right now. Cause I mean, I had Saturday morning cartoons, for example, and I ate a lot of cereals with all the dyes and all these other things. And my kids literally tell me, they're like, oh, we want to have Saturday morning cartoons just like you. But of course it is that YouTube thing. And I limit it to SpongeBob. Like that's appropriate for their
Right,
ages right
right.
now. But I think that's so interesting. This whole idea of rehearsal and visualization and imagination. I wonder because when it comes to toys and just like the way that they've changed through the years, like how did, like, for example, Tickle Me Elmo, like how did that support people in terms of capabilities or anything? I'm curious.
Well, Tickle Me Elmo was kind of an outlier in that, in terms of classical play, Tickle Me Elmo became a fad, right? And
Mm,
fads take on a life of their own. They kind of jump the shark, or jump from the toy industry, because Tickle Me Elmo started as an entertaining little preschool doll for preschoolers,
mhm.
infants and preschoolers. Suddenly, it becomes this whole cultural phenomenon that everybody has to have, and it becomes, so it's a fad, so it becomes kind of a marker in time. So if you were around for Tickle Me Elmo and you remember that, it's sort of a springboard to your memories of what the latter part of 1996 was about, because that's when Tickle Me Elmo was really huge. So that's not really kind of play in the way that I talk about it a lot.
Mm.
That becomes a cultural event. And my other joke about Tickle Me Elmo is $40, really, basically, or more. You can have a Tickle Me Elmo and be really cool for a lot less than you can have a Birkin bag.
Wow, yeah, that's true. That is true. It's so funny. This conversation just takes me down the whole nostalgic route. Like I'm thinking about my Steve Urkel joke pull doll. Do you remember
Yeah,
that one? The
yeah, yeah,
Steve
of course.
Urkel? Yeah. So anyways, I'm totally like aging myself right now. I'm like, oh, I had Steve Urkel and I had Popples and all the like. What do you think, nostalgia? Let's talk about that because I feel like a lot of marketers use that, in order to kind of like pull forth a certain generation, let's say. And I even feel like at a supermarket, like I'm like, I think they know who their shoppers are with the music.
Oh
But
yeah, oh
let's
yeah.
talk about nostalgia. Like, and again, thinking about more quote unquote modern toys, like, and back to like these like electronics, like, do you think that it'll be the same sort of calling card, I think is the right phrase? Like when someone starts saying, oh, like let's say 10 years from now, what's the name of the Stumble Guys? Like, do you think that people
Mm.
will say like a certain like thing on video games and it'll have the same emotional pull as like Tickle Me Elmo, Popples,
Yeah,
Cabbage Patch?
it's hard to know. The thing about nostalgia is it's really for adults, right? Nostalgia is for
Mm,
people looking back. When you're 3 and 4, you're not nostalgic for much. You're not remembering much. Maybe you remember your pull-ups, right? When you had your pull-ups. but you're not really nostalgic for something because you haven't been around that much. The challenge from a toy marketing standpoint is relying on nostalgia to sell toys. Because, I mean, yes, there's a certain level of you as a mom had My Little Pony or Littlest Pet Shop or any of those huge hits, Masters of the Universe, and you want to share those with your child. But for it to engage your child's imagination, there has to be something authentic to them. It's not just mom liked this, so I'm going to like it too. That doesn't really work. I mean, look at Barbie and how Barbie's been redefined over the years because Barbie always reflects the culture at any given time. So in 1959, she could be a fashion model or a bride, right? Pretty much. Those are the Barbie options. Today, there are hundreds of careers and there's hundreds of abilities. And the Barbie line looks like the world kids are growing up in, just as it did in 1959. It's just a more diverse and broader world with more possibility for girls and women today than it was in 1959.
So when it comes to the toy industry, who's actually using their imagination to come up with like what to make for the future? Like, is it a combination of kids and adults? Is it like who's actually imagining like right now, like in the Mattels, etc. What's coming down the line, like 10 years from now, what's going to be hot and cool, and like how do you imagine something like that?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I think it's like, my crystal ball usually needs a shot of Windex to so I can get a clearer sense. But it's more an art than a science. That's for sure. And it's looking at trends. It's looking at how are kids playing? How are they interacting? How are they socializing? What is fun to them? And what's going on in the culture at large? Because the toy industry always reflects the culture. We're always reflecting because kids, most healthy kids, they aspire to being big. They want to grow up and they want the things like their parents have. So back in the early 2000s when cell phones came out, you saw tons of preschool cell phones, right? You don't see that so much anymore because the preschoolers have a real cell phone right now. But you see things that will allow them to feel like they are part of the culture and they are growing up into it and that they are older and perhaps more capable than they really are, because that's an important imaginative tool to help in the maturation process.
That's fascinating. So that's true. It was definitely a lot of like, I don't know, mommy and me things. Like you see them with like a cash register or like a Target cart, right? The plastic little one, right?
Yeah.
Because their parent is shopping at Target. And so I wonder because it's like there's some habits that as a parent, like maybe we want to shake off ourselves, but we're inadvertently doing a lot. So like the cell phone one, I'm like, oh God, yeah, mommy has a cell phone and now her child does too. And it's like, how can I stop? And it's a reinforcement. But I'm wondering, okay, so in terms of the future and in terms of toys, have you ever done or seen any sort of things where the mom was playing with the child versus the child was playing by themselves? Like any differences there? Because I would love to just kind of inspire a listener right now to consider the fact that actually getting lost in play with their child can be even more beneficial than just having your child play with a toy to the side and you're doing something completely different.
I think that is critically important. One of the things that we're talking to parents of Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids, and Gen Alpha was born 2010 to this year. And one of the things that parents talk about is some of the best part of their day is when they're playing with kids. And what I always suggest is that if you're playing with your kid, especially if they're a preschooler, let the child run the play and you respond. Don't tell them, oh, look at this. Oh, do that. You don't have to teach. It doesn't have to teach them anything, right? It doesn't have to teach. Kids are going to learn. So really letting that child's imagination drive the experience, because I think every parent has had the experience where your child comes up with something and you go, where did that come from?
Oh yeah, 100% all the time.
And it's because they're sponges and they're listening and they're absorbing everything, and then they're processing it through their childlike brains or their childish brains. So I think that letting the child do that, but being there and being in communication is really important. When I was growing up, and maybe when you were too, we had three different worlds. We had kid world, where no adults came in and the kids were doing that. We had adult world, where we weren't allowed, where the parents were doing that. And then there was family world, which was dinner and vacations and being yelled at about your grades or whatever that was. But those three worlds don't really seem to exist anymore. And parents and kids are much more integrated in one another's lives. I think that's an outcome of COVID. It's actually a very positive outcome from COVID because, you as mom and dad, have fun with your kids. Come on. It's again, back to the idea of process rather than outcome. They don't have to become an expert ball player. They don't have to become an expert thing at times. They can actually just learn and play and discover the world and share those discoveries with you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's an opportunity for someone that has to think a lot in life and feels the stresses of life to kind of let go and just stop thinking and just going with what is. Be present.
Right.
Be totally present.
Be totally present and just be open to what it is. It's trying not to, as I was saying, it doesn't have to have a definitive outcome. And, the one thing I think we've lost track of often in our culture right now is the idea of embracing process. It's really okay to make mistakes. It's really okay to try something as long as you get up and start again, right? I mean, how many times have you, I was talking about for me, I learned to ski late, right? And I'm a really mediocre skier. I'm enthusiastic, but I'm not good. And I had somebody who was teaching me, and he said, Chris, eventually, I was scared. He said, eventually you're going to have to point your skis down the hill. Right. So I did it. I fell a lot. I did that, but I was so eager to learn that I'd fall and get up again. I had to learn how to get up. But that's the thing that I think is, if you have an idea of where you'd like to go, but embrace the process on the way there, because who knows what you're going to learn and what you're going to discover.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that's the key to any goal. It's just you have to really fall in love with the process as you head towards the vision, the goal, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And I also love the fact that, as with play, it's like there's something that's so pure about it, when left unmanipulated. It's like, as a parent, we might have this desire to educate our kids up the wazoo with regards to every educational toy out there, and every moment we're with them, we're teaching them another language or coding or something. But right. I think, just being open to a little bit, unstructured play and that time with your child has so many benefits. And I think, Chris, the work that you're doing, just helping us kind of stay connected to play as just being fun and okay and positive is really helpful. Thank you so much for the work that you've done.
Thanks. I mean, I really do think that as I mentioned joy before, it does open the door to being joyful and going, oh, wow, that's fun. I mean, when was the last time you said, oh, wow, that's really fun?
100%. Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Chris. So where can listeners continue to learn about their favorite toys, about you, about what's up ahead in the toy industry?
You can come see thetoyguy.com. That's probably the best way. And then on Instagram, I'm the toy guy. So yeah, and I post a lot of pictures from things like toy fairs and different things and things that are fun for me and that make me giggle.
Thank you so much, Chris. Have an awesome one.
Thank you.
My 3 takeaways for this conversation that you can absolutely take to the bank and apply in your home are: first, this idea that playing with our kids has benefits for our kids, but also for us, especially if you're a super busy mom. It helps put you in the immediate present moment. So that's a big, big perk right there. Second is this idea that it's all about the process as opposed to the final answer. And that's something that I know is hard to think about when you're constantly thinking about what's next in your life. So thinking about play as something that you're doing and it's a process instead of to put together that Lego piece might be a great shift in your thinking and could relieve you of the stress and pressure of getting things right. My third point here, my third point would be that in terms of the benefits of playing, I hadn't realized how psychologically deep some of these toys touch the minds of our kids. So the simple fact that we are thinking about, working out relationships when you're doing a diorama, which may have been the case for me personally, or maybe you're thinking about whether or not you have skills like a superhero, which was something that Chris shared. I just never thought about how psychologically interesting playing with a toy could be. So you might want to reconsider this idea that playing with a toy is just a way to distract your child or keep them focused on something other than breaking things. There could be real psychological value and also something for you to just consider psychological opportunity when it comes to the choices behind the toys we put in front of our kids. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Again, this episode was brought to you by my book, Fertile Imagination. I am excited about it. It's a guide for stretching every mom's superpower for maximum impact. Your imagination is your superpower. That is why I had Chris on the show today. I encourage you to check out the show notes where you could actually purchase the book and let me know that you did. I am always available for conversation and any questions. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you. And until next Tuesday.